The Jedi Civil War had come to an end, but the wounds it left behind still bled. The end of the war did not bring immediate peace to the galaxy. Although Darth Malak, the self-proclaimed Dark Lord of the Sith, had been defeated at the Star Forge, and the Sith fleet had been dismantled, the war had left a deep scar in every corner of the galaxy. What had once been a conflict between the Jedi and the Sith had devastated countless worlds, weakened the Galactic Republic, and left the Jedi Order on the brink of extinction. However, Malak's death did not mean the end of the Sith. Darkness still lingered in the shadows, with surviving factions fighting for control over the remnants of a fractured empire. With Malak's fall at the Starforge, the power of the Sith Empire crumbled immediately. The space station at Rakata Prime, the source of the Sith fleet's production, had been destroyed, and the cohesion among the dark forces evaporated in an instant. The remaining Sith Lords, who had once followed Revan and Malak, saw an opportunity to seize control. Without centralized leadership, the former Sith commanders and their followers split into factions, each claiming their right of succession. The galaxy, however, could not yet breathe easy. Although the Sith fleet had been severely decimated, the survivors did not simply scatter. The struggle for internal dominance within the Sith Empire intensified, with duels between Dark Lords, betrayals, and a desperate quest for power. Some sought to re-establish their dominion on Korriban, while others chose to hide in the Outer Rim, waiting for the chance to regroup. But the most concerning shadow of all was the one no one could see, the Sith Emperor. Still unknown to the galaxy at that time, the true ruler of the Sith had observed the conflict from afar, allowing Malak and Revan to play their roles in his grand strategy. The defeat of the Sith Empire in the Jedi Civil War was merely a setback in his plan for the resurgence of the Sith. The Republic emerged from the war as a fractured institution. Although it had prevailed over the Sith, it had done so at great cost. Countless worlds lay devastated, with collapsed economies and entire planets in ruins after years of occupation and sieges. The destruction of Taris, the invasion of multiple systems, and the weakening of the Republic's military forces left a sense of insecurity among the populace. The Galactic Senate, already weakened before the conflict, now struggled to stabilize the government. Trust in the Republic had diminished greatly, and numerous sectors considered the possibility of independence, feeling that the bureaucracy on Coruscant could no longer protect them. If the Galactic Republic had been weakened, the Jedi Order had been shattered. Throughout the war, the Order had suffered catastrophic losses. With the conversion of many of its knights to the Sith during the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War, the Jedi were at their lowest point. The survivors of the war were few, and those who remained were uncertain whether the Order could recover. Many Jedi who had fought against the Sith disappeared, some seeking refuge in anonymity to avoid retaliation, while others lost faith in the Order itself. The Jedi Council, once a powerful leadership force, dissolved after the destruction of its enclave on Dantooine at the hands of Malak. Without its guidance, the Jedi were scattered and directionless. It reached a point where the Order could no longer function as a unified institution. As the Republic attempted to rebuild, the Jedi were haunted. In the years that followed, those who had survived would become targets of the Sith and other enemies. The first Jedi Purge loomed, and the Order teetered on the edge of disappearance. With the Senate striving to restore order in the galaxy, the reconstruction of the Republic became an immediate priority. Entire worlds needed assistance to recover from Sith occupation, and the Republic's military forces urgently required recruitment and resupply. However, the crisis soon gave way to new problems. The war had left numerous sectors unguarded and uncontrolled, allowing criminal groups like the Exchange and the Hutts to expand their influence. The Senate, despite its attempts at reconstruction, lacked the resources to counter this criminal expansion. Corruption within the government further complicated efforts, enabling crime syndicates to operate with impunity in many systems. Revan's name became a living legend. To the Galactic Republic, he was the savior who had defeated the Mandalorians and Malak's Sith Empire and secured the galaxy's survival. To the Jedi Order, he was a complicated case. While the Jedi Council acknowledged his role in Malak's defeat, his very existence challenged the Order's principles. The idea that a Jedi who had been the Dark Lord of the Sith could fully redeem himself and return to the light was uncomfortable for many Jedi Masters. Worse still, Revan had become a figure outside Jedi dogma, with a unique perception of the Force, having lived in both the light and the dark. The Council's discomfort grew when Revan openly defied Jedi traditions by marrying Bastila Shan, the young Jedi who had initially helped erase Revan's memories and keep him in check during the mission against Darth Malak. Their union was not only an affront to Jedi codes, but also reinforced the idea that the Order no longer had the same control over its members. Bastila showed that despite having been the Council's prodigy, she now remained loyal to Revan above the Order's doctrine. With his position within the Order increasingly complicated, Revan distanced himself. He was no ordinary Jedi and would never be one again. And though the Republic revered him, the truth was that the galaxy remained in peril. Revan had fragmented memories of his time as the Dark Lord. Not everything had returned, but his mind held a disturbing truth. The war with Malak had been nothing more than an echo of a far greater threat. He knew something else was behind it all, something that had pushed him and Malak to become conquerors after the Mandalorian Wars. There was something beyond the Outer Rim that even the Republic had no access to, something powerful enough to have influenced the fall to the dark side of him and Malak, two of the Order's most powerful Jedi. The Jedi Civil War had not been the true conflict, only a prelude to an even greater war. Revan understood then that he had to act. He could not allow the Republic, already weakened, to be caught off guard by an enemy it did not even know existed. Yet this action would be even more difficult, not only because of his commitment and love for Bastila, but also due to the news that he would soon be a father. A future child awaited. But this only strengthened his resolve to act, for his family and for future generations. If the darkness he had sensed awakened, there would be salvation for no one. And so, he boarded the Ebon Hawk and set off into the unknown. He left behind his wife, his unborn child, and the Republic that considered him its greatest champion. Only a few knew the truth of his departure. To most of the galaxy, Revan simply vanished. The galaxy soon noticed his absence. The Jedi, already decimated, lost not only one of their own, but also their strongest symbol. With the Jedi Council in ruins and the few remaining knights scattered, the Order was in a state of crisis. The defeat of the Sith in the war did not mean they were extinct. In fact, hunting the remnants of the Sith Empire became a priority. But without Revan, the task became even harder. The Jedi Council attempted to regroup and reorganize. However, they lacked the numbers and influence of old. Many of the surviving Jedi, disillusioned by the war, had vanished into exile, refusing to continue under a council that had allowed the war to happen. Without Revan, without Bastila, and without the many Jedi lost in the war, the Jedi Order was a shadow of what it had once been, and the things were about to get worse. As the galaxy struggled to heal, a new darkness took root. With Revan gone, the Republic stood defenseless against an enemy that did not conquer but consumed. Betrayal whispered in the shadows, hunger devoured the remnants, and pain endured beyond death itself. The Sith had returned. Before her fall to the dark side, Traya was a Jedi and a scholar of the Force, who spent years seeking to understand its true nature. It was said that she had been Revan's teacher and that her influence helped shape the mind of the brilliant and enigmatic Jedi before he became the Dark Lord of the Sith. Her eyes, though functional, were seldom used, as she preferred to rely on long and exhaustive meditations to decipher the mysteries of the universe. For decades, she challenged her apprentices with complex questions, Traya's conundrums, designed to force them to question their own understanding of the Force. Though her colleagues saw these riddles as mere eccentricities, her students were fascinated. However, when many of her former apprentices joined her former Padawan Revan in the war against the Mandalorians, Traya's teachings were harshly questioned by the Jedi Council. Rejected by the Jedi Order, Traya withdrew in silence. Some believed she had also followed Revan to war, but her journey led her down a different path. Convinced that her exile was proof of the Jedi's hypocrisy, Traya embarked on a quest for knowledge that took her to the darkest reaches of the galaxy. Following Revan's footsteps to the planet Malachor V, she found her destiny. Malachor was a desolate world, scarred by the devastation of the Battle of Malachor V, where Revan and the Jedi exiles' use of the mass shadow generator had reduced entire armies to rubble and ash. There, amid the remnants of that destruction, Traya discovered the Trias Academy, an ancient Sith stronghold containing forbidden knowledge. What she found was not a confrontation, but a revelation. She came across ancient texts, Sith codices filled with forbidden knowledge. They spoke of the truths of the cosmos, warnings that the universe was not made for sanity. Since time immemorial, Force-sensitive beings had lived with the certainty that the Force was the great truth of the universe, the invisible thread binding life, light, and darkness. But in the depths of the Trias Academy, Traya uncovered an idea that shattered her perception of reality. The ancient writings of the Sith, inherited from the last descendants of the pure Sith, spoke of an uncomfortable truth. Existence, in its essence, seemed devoid of purpose, a chaotic void. Yet those who perceived the Force could not accept this, for their connection to it made them feel there was a deeper order, a hidden purpose behind all things. And yet, what was the Force but a lie imposed upon them? A veil that forced the Force-sensitive to live in an illusion, to play predestined roles as puppets of a power they did not fully understand. Traya wanted to reject this idea. The Force guided them, used them, pushed them toward its own designs without offering true will. Jedi and Sith were merely different manifestations of this enslavement. That was the ultimate betrayal. The Force was neither a gift nor a blessing. It was a prison, and if there was a wound in it, if the devastation of Malachor V had proven that the Force could be harmed, then perhaps it could also be destroyed. Traya immersed herself in that forbidden knowledge, no longer as the truth seeker she had once been, but as the Lady of Betrayal. Darth Traya had been born. The Trias Academy became Traya's base of operations. There, she trained a new Sith and gathered followers who shared her desires. Yet among them, two figures stood out, Darth Sion and Darth Nihilus. Darth Sion was a Sith warrior shaped by suffering. During Exar Kun's Sith War, he had been severely wounded countless times, but his hatred and determination kept him alive. Through the power of the dark side, he learned to use his pain as a source of strength, allowing him to withstand fatal injuries and remain in a state of undeath. His body was marked by constant scars and fractures, but his mind was even more shattered. For Sion, existence itself was an endless cycle of suffering. He embraced the dark side completely, and under Traya's tutelage on Malachor V, became a formidable disciple. Yet unlike Traya, who saw the Force as something to be destroyed, Sion desired only vengeance. Darth Nihilus was more an entity than a man. Once a Jedi, his original identity was consumed in the catastrophe of Malachor V. The energy unleashed by the mass shadow generator left him with an insatiable hunger for the Force. Over time, his physical body deteriorated, becoming little more than a void wrapped in black armor and a terrifying mask. Nihilus did not speak, at least not in conventional terms. His presence was a living curse, capable of draining the Force from entire planets, leaving lifeless worlds in his wake. It was he who led the hunt for the Jedi in the years following the Jedi Civil War, systematically exterminating survivors and stripping them of their life energy. Yet his insatiable hunger made him an unpredictable and destructive force. This alliance, known as the Sith Triumvirate, was fundamentally different from the militaristic empire Malak had commanded. While Malak had sought galactic domination through conquest, the Triumvirate had no interest in ruling. Their purpose was the total eradication of the Jedi Order. Unlike the Sith Empire, it was not based on a military hierarchy or territorial control, but on the manipulation of fear and systematic extermination. Thus, the Lady of Betrayal, the Lord of Hunger, and the Lord of Pain united, but not for long. Darth Traya had forged the Sith Triumvirate with her two most powerful disciples, Darth Nihilus, whose initial purpose was to eliminate the remnants of the Jedi Order, but over time, their visions diverged. Traya's philosophy, centered on manipulation and knowledge, clashed with Nihilus's insatiable void and Sion's unrelenting brutality. Traya had underestimated the nature of her apprentices. Nihilus, corrupted by his endless need to consume the Force, became an entity of pure hunger, devouring entire worlds. Sion, a living corpse, sustained by pure hatred and suffering, began to reject his master's wisdom, seeing her teachings as weakness. At the heart of the Traya's core, they confronted her. Sion struck her again and again, his flesh reconstituting with each blow, while Nihilus stripped her of the Force. For the first time in her existence, Traya felt absolute emptiness. The mistress of betrayers had been betrayed. Exiled and powerless, she was forced to wander the galaxy, hiding in the shadows while her former apprentices began their hunt. And so, in the year 3954, before Battle of Yavin, the first Jedi Purge began. From Malachor V, Sith assassins emerged from the darkness to stalk the last remnants of the Order. The war was not fought on open battlefields, but in the shadows, with surgical strikes and silent massacres. The Jedi, weakened by the recent Jedi Civil War, found themselves defenseless. Temples were emptied, their guardians vanished without a trace. Some masters tried to hide, but the Sith threat was relentless. The extermination was so effective that the galaxy believed the Jedi had been eradicated. Survivors were forced to flee, renouncing the Force to hide. The Purge not only destroyed the Jedi, but also shattered the galaxy's trust in their ability to protect it. With each fallen Jedi, fear spread, and the shadow of the Triumvirate grew stronger. In the darkness, the reign of the Sith was consolidated, and the galaxy descended into a terrifying silence. And worst of all, this was only the beginning. 2 years after the Purge began, in 3952 before Battle of Yavin, the last known members of the Jedi Order, weakened and fearful after years of conflict, desperately sought a path to survival. The planet Katarr, a peaceful colonial world inhabited by the Miraluka, a species whose physical lives were useless but who perceived the world entirely through the Force, seemed a perfect refuge. Their unique connection to the Force made them natural allies in these dark times. Jedi Master Atris, a woman of inflexible convictions and questionable methods, organized the secret conclave. Before her colleagues, Atris declared that the meeting's goal was to discuss the future of the Order, to find new ways to combat the growing darkness, and perhaps uncover the nature of the threat lurking in the shadows. The surviving Jedi, desperate for answers, arrived with renewed hope. Among the attendees were some of the most revered and powerful Jedi Masters left in the galaxy. Master Vandar Tokare, the wise and diminutive master who had guided the Order for decades from the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, led the group of leaders. Beside him stood masters of great renown, such as Dorak, Zarlestin, whose knowledge of Jedi history was unmatched. The attendance of other Jedi Masters was considerable. Each of them represented centuries of accumulated knowledge and Jedi tradition. Their loss would be a blow from which the Order might never recover. But behind this noble facade lay a more sinister plan. Atris, consumed by fear and paranoia, had designed a trap. She intentionally leaked information about the Conclave, hoping to lure out the hidden enemies of the Jedi. In her arrogance, she believed she could identify and expose those hunting the Jedi, thus becoming the Order's savior. It was a dangerous game where the last members of the Order would be the bait. What Atris did not anticipate was the magnitude of the horror she had invoked. The leaked information reached Darth Nihilus, whose very nature transcended common understanding. He was not merely a user of the dark side. Nihilus had become an aberration of the Force, a living wound, a hungry void that fed on life energy itself. Before the Conclave could even begin, Nihilus' ship, the Ravager, appeared in orbit above Katarr. The Miraluka sensed his presence like a glacial cold piercing their souls. The gathered Jedi perceived the disturbance, but it was too late to flee. From his ship, Nihilus unleashed a force-draining technique of inconceivable power. It was not a conventional attack. It was a hunger unleashed, a void demanding to be filled. Nihilus' devastating technique did not discriminate between Jedi, Miraluka, or any other life form. Like an invisible wave of death, his power swept across the entire planet. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Millions of voices screamed in unison, only to be abruptly silenced. Vegetation withered. Animals collapsed lifeless. All were consumed as their essence was torn from their bodies. In moments, a planet teeming with life was reduced to a dead world. Only silence remained. Amid all this devastation, Nihilus turned to one person, a lone survivor. A young Miraluka named Visas Mar had survived the Holocaust, though survived barely described her state. Nihilus descended to the dead planet and found her. He could have consumed her like all the others, but something about her caught his interest. In an act of perverse mercy, Nihilus took her as his apprentice. Visas Mar, the sole witness to the Katarr massacre, was brought aboard. There, in the perpetual shadows of the Sith Lord's ship, she became his herald, his eyes in a galaxy that would soon know terror without precedent. Her will broken, her spirit bent, Visas accepted, serving the being who had destroyed everything she loved. The Katarr Conclave set the tone for the first Jedi Purge, and so, in the silence of a dead planet, began one of the darkest chapters in Jedi history, written with the blood of the fallen and the tears of the one who remained to remember them.